Hello everyone. Welcome. Have you ever noticed the red and green marks on a ship's clock and wondered what they mean? These marks are not just for decoration, they played a crucial role in maritime safety. And believe it or not, their existence is directly linked to one of history's most infamous disasters, the sinking of the Titanic. Let's dive into the fascinating history behind them. Before modern distress systems, ships relied on radio operators to send and receive emergency messages. To ensure that no distress signal was missed, a strict system of radio silence periods was introduced, and that's where the red and green markings on the radio room clock come in. First, let's talk about red markings, 15 to 18 and 45 to 48 minutes past the hour. These marked the silent periods for 500 kHz Morse code, the international distress frequency for ships using Morse telegraphy. During these 3-minute intervals, no routine transmissions were allowed, ensuring that weak distress signals, like the ones Titanic sent out, could be heard without interference. Before the Titanic disaster, no standard silent periods existed. The Titanic disaster highlighted the need for continuous distress monitoring. In 1912, post-Titanic reforms, the 500 kHz Morse code silent periods, red markings, were introduced to improve distress signal reception. Now, let's talk about the green markings, 00 to 03 and 30 to 33 minutes past the hour. These are the silent periods for 2182 kHz, the primary frequency for radio telephone, voice, distress calls in later years. Just like with Morse code, these ensured that emergency voice calls were not drowned out by regular communications. Near to 1950s, the 2182 kHz frequency was officially designated as the main MF radio telephone distress frequency by international maritime organizations. So, first ships communicated using Morse code on 500 kHz and later, voice transmissions on 2182 kHz, MF distress frequency, and VHF channel 16, 156.8 MHz. But here's the problem: if too many ships were constantly transmitting, weak distress signals could be drowned out. To fix this, the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, introduced mandatory radio silence periods. To match the 500 kHz silent periods, 3-minute silence periods were introduced for 2182 kHz. This led to the addition of green markings on radio room clocks at 00 to 03 and 30 to 33 minutes past the hour. During these 3-minute windows, all routine radio communications must stop. This allows radio operators to listen exclusively for distress calls, ensuring that even the faintest SOS signal can be heard. Now, let's talk about the most awaited information, the Titanic's connection to these marks. Here's where it gets really interesting. The reason we have these red and green marks today can be traced all the way back to the Titanic disaster in 1912. When the Titanic struck an iceberg, its radio operators sent out distress calls on 500 kHz, hoping for a nearby ship to respond. But there was a huge problem: some nearby ships had turned off their radios for the night, and others were busy with routine transmissions, not actively listening for distress signals. The SS Californian, which was the closest ship, had its radio operator off duty, and never received Titanic's calls for help. Meanwhile, the Carpathia, which was farther away, did receive the SOS and came to the rescue, but by the time it arrived, it was too late for over 1,500 people. This tragedy was a wake-up call for the maritime industry. In response, the first Safety of Life at Sea Convention, SOLAS, in 1914 introduced new safety rules which cover mandatory 24/7 radio watchkeeping on distress frequencies. The introduction of radio silence periods, red marks, stronger regulations for distress communication. Over time, as technology advanced, these rules became part of the Global Maritime Distress and Safety System, GMDSS, which is why today's GMDSS clocks still carry these red and green marks as reminders of those early regulations. Even though we now have satellite distress alerts, DSC, digital selective calling, and EPIRBs, these old-school silence periods and NAVTEX schedules are still required by international law. They serve as a backup system, ensuring that no ship's distress call ever goes unheard. So the next time you see a ship's clock, take a moment to appreciate those red and green marks. They're not just markings, they are life-saving traditions shaped by history, from the Titanic to today's modern regulations. If you found this interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more maritime stories. See you in the next video.